All right, everyone. So today I wanted to go over 5 things that every team in Raid Shadow Legends is going to need in order to work well. So let's start off with number 1 here, and this is a very important one, and that is a good support system. Now, a good support system does not necessarily mean a dedicated healer. There's plenty of other things that can work very well as a good support system. So just going over a couple of different support systems in the game, of course, first of all, you do have your traditional healers. Great example of this is, of course, none other than Apothecary. He's got his heal on his second ability right here. There's going to be many other champions in the game that have abilities that'll just directly heal other champions, so that's kind of going to be your definition of a traditional healer. But then you also have a non-traditional healer. A good example of this, my favorite example champion, of course, and that is going to be Vrask. And Vrask heals through his passive ability right here. When he gets enough crit rates, every time he crits, he heals everyone by 10% of his max HP. And because he's an HP-based champion, those heals are going to be very strong. So just an example there of traditional and non-traditional healers. But on top of that, you have plenty of other things that you can do as well. Just simply having lifesteal gear on your champions, that's probably going to be enough for a lot of people. So you don't even need a traditional or non-traditional healer. You could just quite simply use lifesteal sets. You've also got shield sets as well. Plenty of champions also have skills that will give shield. That's another thing. It's not technically a heal, but it is going to give you that support system that you're probably going to need for, you know, certain types of content like dungeons. Just be careful because with shields, they're going to be based off of turns. So, you know, obviously it can be very easy for your shields to fall off, and then all of a sudden you don't have that extra layer of defense that you are relying on. So you've got the shield set as well, which is great for things like dungeons because it's going to activate every single wave. So it'll activate for the 2 trash waves before you actually get to the boss, and then it'll activate again for the boss. But once again, you have to keep in mind that you know, after a couple turns, if you aren't actually killing those trash waves quick enough, your shield set is going to fall off, and you've lost that layer of defense. You've even got other things as well, like the continuous heal buff. If you've got enough of those that you have pile up, that can be a very strong support system. So great example of a rare champion that has a continuous heal and is just a great support champion overall is Reliquary Tender, of course. She has her continuous heal on the second ability right here. And even in the masteries, you've got some support as well. One of my favorite masteries of all time in the actual offense tree is Life Drinker, which is kind of like a mini version of Lifesteal. It's going to give you 5% of a Lifesteal when attacking with 50% HP or less. That might not seem like a lot, but when you pair it up with War Master or Giant Slayer, you can actually get some pretty big numbers just from the Life Drinker passive. So, of course, having a good support system and however the methods that I really kind of just went over right now is going to be crucial for pretty much any team in Raid Shadow Legends. So that's going to be number 1 right there. Now moving on to number 2, this is tying in a little bit with 1, but it's very important to kind of know the distinction between this here, and that is having a somewhat balanced champion EHP or effective health points or the total defenses of your champions. And specifically what I mean by this is, you know, if you have 1 or 2 champions in your team that are really, really squishy and you feel like those are the champions that are just dying all the time, that is sincerely going to mess your team up in many different ways. So it's really worth going through and kind of, you know, seeing how much damage your champions are actually taking each hit. You know, how much is this champion taking in damage? How much is this damage taking? And it's also important to kind of know when you go through dungeons, having in mind what that EHP is important for knowing the enemies and who they are going to attack. Obviously, they're going to try to attack your weakest champions, and you know, if you have some champions that are just incredibly tanky and they have a ton of EHP, and then you have other champions that are super squishy and they're dying all the time, you're going to lose a lot of functionality of your team. Another important thing about this is this kind of ties into unkillable and certain strategies that you might use as well that will kind of give you that you know, false layer of EHP. It's still survivability, but it's technically not, you know, through like HP or defense. It's through an unkillable buff. And if you do decide to, you know, have a team like that, you know, champions that do that, of course, are going to be like Man-Eater here, who's got his unkillable on his 3rd skill. It's just important to make sure that you have your team set up in a way for this to work properly, like speed tuned and all that. That's a whole nother layer of complexity, but if you do decide to do this and this is the route that you're going with your team, just make sure that you're doing it the right way, or you're going to see really, really bad results. Another thing, or I guess a suggestion that I could mention, is if you have a champion that is dying all the time, say you have a full team of defense champions, but then maybe you have one squishy attack-based champion, try putting a revive champion in your group. It's not quite the same substitution as obviously boosting the survivability of that squishy champion, but you might notice that the difference between not having a revive champion with a squishy member in your group and then now having a revive champion in your group with a squishy member could really boost your team's functionality by quite a bit. So that's going to be number 2. Now moving on to number 3 right here. This is the crucial buffs and debuffs checklist. So this is very, very important, especially as you get to higher end content. And it's going to vary a little bit based on the actual difficulty of content that you're doing. Generally speaking, the less difficult content, the buffs and debuffs are not as crucial, but they are still going to give your team an insane amount of additional performance. So of course, the obvious ones are increased attack, increased defense, decreased attack, decreased defense. But another really important thing about this is it's important to have those crucial buffs and debuffs, but it's also important to make sure that the champions that are offering those crucial buffs and debuffs, that's not the only thing that they're doing. They need to be somehow performing in another way in your group. And this is why I really like certain champions, and I'll showcase them a lot. Champions like Doomscreech, who's in the Undead Hordes here. Let's see if I can find him. Here he is. This guy just offers so much to the table for a rare champion. He's got, crucial buffs and debuffs, but he's also got a lot of other things going for him as well. So, you've got that decreased accuracy. It's a skill based on attack and HP as well, so he's going to be really beefy. You've got the increased defense. You've got that turn meter fill. And you've got an AoE that places a shield buff as well. So, there's just so much going on, and that's why I love champions that have really, crazy skill kits like that. So, all right, now moving on to number 4 on the list here, and that is this is especially important as you do, again, get to those higher level dungeons. Specialty champions, but they are also good as overall champions. And this is especially important for things like the first couple of trash waves in dungeons, especially if you're going for good clear times. You might be able to clear out content, but it's really slow. I know I've been there when I was first doing Dragon 20 and whatnot. I think it was taking me, 8 minutes a run. I was technically able to clear it, but, is it really worth doing it if it's taking you 8 or so minutes per run? And this is why having those specialty champions who are also good overall champions is really crucial for a good team. So a great example of a rare champion that I like to use for this is just Coldheart. Obviously a pretty well-known champion, but if you take a look at her skill kit, she's got her Heartseeker skill, which is generally, I would say, what most people consider to be her best feature here, because it's based off of enemy max HP. So great DPS skill for bosses. It's going to scale off of the HP that they have as well as the attack, and you can see some absolutely crazy numbers with this ability. But then on top of that, she's also got a skill 1, her auto attack, that attacks 4 times at random, and it's not quite an AoE, but it's still very, very good for clear trash waves. So you're going to be able to burn through those really quickly, and then once you end up getting to the boss, this Heartseeker skill is going to help you burn through the boss really quickly. And then on top of that as well, she's also got a lot of other good stuff that's going to contribute towards that, third category of critical buffs and debuffs. So very important as you get to those higher level dungeons. And of course, the last thing on the list here, very importantly, I wanted to save this one for last because this is a really easy mistake to make that you can probably fix pretty quickly, and that is having a good leader/aura champion that does not have its power wasted. What do I mean by that? This is another reason why I like to say speed auras are also considered one of the best, is because it's pretty difficult for speed to kind of go wasted on champions unless you're using like a very specific team that needs to have a certain amount of speed for, unkillable. But, for most general teams, the more speed, the better. That's not necessarily going to be the case for other auras like, critical rate, defense. That's not saying that those auras are bad at all. It's totally fine to use a crit rate aura or a defense aura or an HP aura The thing is, though, you need to make sure that when you do use an aura like that, that you don't have those stats go to waste. So if you are using a critical rate aura, it's really important to make sure that whatever team that you have and whatever team that you work on, the gear that you have is going to work around that critical rate aura. If you have, say, 15% crit rate aura, you want to make sure that your champions don't have higher than 85% crit. If all your champions now have 100% crit rate and you're using a crit rate aura, well, a lot of that power is now just going to waste. Same thing with like a HP or defense based aura. If you have one of those, then obviously you want to make sure that the other champions in your group are also going to be HP or defense based champions. So you want to make sure to maximize the power of your leader or a champion as best as you can. And if you want to play it safe, or if you have a team that's kind of got a mix of roles, you don't want to go through and change all your gear or swap out some of your defense based champions to HP based champions or vice versa, you can always just go with the speed aura, generally considered the most versatile aura, and that'll totally work. So anyway, this is just 5 things that I wanted to go over that every good group is really going to need to work well and function in Raid Shadow Legends. So I'm hoping that these things helped out at least a little bit. So if you enjoyed and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate all the support, everyone. Feel free to leave a quick like as well. It means more than you can imagine. So thank you so much to all of you who decide to do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos should be up on the screen right about now. Feel free to check them out. If not, until next time, take care, everyone. This is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.